The pitiful Balkan fleet was nothing more than prey for the cruel warlords of the Threne, and it was simply torn apart in the same way as a zombie tears the flesh off of a newborn Balkan larva. Murloc attempted to blot out the unpleasant reality by lying in his bunk on the cramped Balkan spacecraft. He placed one arm over his eye stalks in an effort to conceal his eyes. Sadly, the war was not going well. In a terrible way, within a span of just 3 years, the Threne had successfully eradicated a dozen Balkan colonies by destroying their birthing pools, destroying defenseless larvae with plasma fire, and transforming Balkan towns into slag. Although the ship that belonged to Murloc was a part of the defense fleet, they were completely outmatched in every manner. Ships belonging to the Threne were superior in terms of speed, size, armament, and armor. While civilians in the Balkans were suffering in excruciating pain, there was no other option than to retreat repeatedly. The wingmate of Murdoch, Carvel, sagged into the bunk beside him and let out a disappointed groan as he did so. Once again, a colony fails. Millions of people have died. The eye stalks of Carvel were drooping. It is impossible for this to continue. In 10 years, if we continue at this rate, we will extinct. Murloc pressed his teeth tightly together. It was the only possibility that he was aware of for the survival of his species, and it was a hope that the leadership of the Balkans considered to be irrational and suicidal. The humans were correct, Murloc realized with a click. Not only did they warn us about the Threne, but they also volunteered to assist us. Are you completely insane? Caver said with a hiss. The humans who are crazy? Would you like to bring the people who committed genocide here at this time, when we are on the edge of collapsing? We are going to have our throats cut and our blood drawn by them. At the same time that warning klaxons sounded throughout the ship, Murloc's heart was racing. The Threne had located them once more, and they were now present with this very small fleet, which served as the final line of defense for the homeworld of the Balkans. Murloc was aware that it was time for him to make a horrible decision. Either he would be destroyed by the Threne, or he would summon the detested humans, who were the only soldiers who were crazy enough to assist them in winning this war. Since the beginning of humankind's exploration of the cosmos, people have been filled with awe and astonishment at the vast array of opportunities that lie in wait for them here on Earth. This was a dream come true. The possibility of becoming a member of a galactic community and of being acknowledged as a highly developed civilization. During the presentation of their most significant technological accomplishments, the human delegation stood tall and proud in the big hall of the Galactic Assembly. Their chests were puffed out with pride. It was said that they had mastered the power of fusion, that their starships were sleek enough to travel the immense distances that separated stars, and that their artificial intelligence was so advanced that it could solve difficult issues in the blink of an eye. However, as soon as the human ambassador had completed his remarks, the representative of Dolan let forth a snort of derision. The extraterrestrial, who was short and had 3 eyes, approached the human delegation with a contemptuous smile on his face. He was waddling up to them. You believe that your kids' toys are impressive to us. When the Dolan chuckled, his tone was filled with a deep sense of disdain. We've seen 1,000 different species that are just like you, all of them convinced that they are unique because they are able to construct a couple of fancy ships. Humans, however, allow me to share something with you. Within this galaxy, the only thing that is of any significance is the resources, and based on what we've observed, it appears that your little planet is absolutely besieged by them. As the Dolan's words slowly set in, the human delegation stood in startled silence, their excitement visibly diminishing as they took in the information. Despite this, they were determined not to let this setback bring down their spirits. They were going to demonstrate to the entire galaxy that they were more than just a source of riches that might be put to use. Therefore, the humans began the process of forming trade deals with a variety of extraterrestrial species, giving their advanced technology in exchange for the resources they required to continue their exploration of the stars. They approached the Dolans with the intention of forming a collaboration that would be beneficial to both parties, but the Dolans already had other plans in mind. Without so much as a word of warning, they had brazenly plundered millions of tons of resources from the planet Earth within a matter of months. They had also stripped entire regions of their resources. As soon as the humans raised their objections, the Dolan continued to laugh in their faces. This should serve as a lesson to all of you, humans, the ambassador from Dolan hissed. You are either given paid in advance, or you are not given anything at all in this galaxy. Despite the fact that they were furious, the humans refused to allow this setback to define who they were. It was inevitable that they would come across further allies and partners who would treat them with the respect that they deserved. In light of this, when the Selene Empire offered an invitation to 100,000 humans to move to their planet as honored guests, the humans jumped at the chance to do so. When they boarded the Selene spacecraft, they did so with optimism and excitement, eager to begin a new phase of their trip through the galaxy. However, as soon as the humans arrived on the homeworld of Selene, they discovered that they were encircled by fully armed security personnel. They had their goods taken away from them, they were compelled to live in dirty and crowded barracks, and they were forced to work in the harsh labor camps run by the Selene. The humans were taken aback and furious by the news. They demanded to have a conversation with the leadership of the Selene in order to negotiate the release of their people, but the Selene merely dismissed their demands with laughter. According to the declaration made by the Selene Emperor, "Humans, you are now our property, and we will do whatever we want without restriction." The humans were adamant in their refusal to accept their fate. They staged a daring escape attempt, forcing their way out of the labor camps and capturing a transport ship that had been in the process of being destroyed. On the other hand, when they were making their way back to Earth, they were stopped by a fleet of warships belonging to the Selene race. The human ship was the target of a barrage of 100,000 Viridian missiles that were launched by the Selene. Each missile was directed at a major population center on Earth by the Selene. While the humans gazed in dread as the missiles raced towards their homeworld, they were aware that they had no ability to stop them from reaching their destination. After the Viridian missiles exploded in the sky above the cities of Earth, they unleashed a dreadful plague that caused millions of people to writhe in anguish. As a result of the Viridium's ability to burn through both flesh and bone, its victims were reduced to nothing more than charred casings. Immediately following the assault, the Jandis group made their way over to the humans and extended an offer of assistance. They asserted that they had a remedy for the Viridian plague, a drug that could heal the wounds and bring the patients back to a state of health. As a result of their desperation, the humans enthusiastically embraced the offer that Jandis made. Over the course of their persistent efforts to treat the victims of Viridium, the doctors of Jandis administered their miraculous treatment to everyone who required it. At first, it appeared like the treatment was successful. Viridium burns started to heal, and patients started to regain their strength during the course of the treatment. However, just when the humans were beginning to have hope that the worst of what had happened to them was behind them, the patients started to pass away. At first, there were only a few isolated occurrences, but before long, the number of fatalities began to spread like wildfire. The victims writhed in anguish as the Jandis cure devastated their bodies, liquefying their organs and left them as little more than sacks of bones and flesh. The patients were treated with the Jandis cure. When the humans finally saw the reality, they were filled with utter disbelief. It was never the intention of the Jandis to find a cure for the Viridian plague. Rather than that, they had utilized the humans as unknowing test subjects for a new bioweapon, which was a virus that was much more lethal than the Viridium itself. It was time for the humans to stop being polite. They had been enslaved by the Selene, the Dalans had taken advantage of them by robbing them blind, and the Jandis had used them as test subjects. The planet Earth went completely silent, thereby preventing any and all communications with the rest of the galaxy. It was the humans who were cowering in shame, putting their tails between their legs, and the other alien races perceived this as the humans. The tale of the foolish visitors who were shown their place spread like wildfire across the galaxy until it reached every corner of the universe. Comedy performed late at night demonstrates the gullibility of the human race. The expression "dumb as a human" entered the vernacular as a result of the proliferation of disparaging memes on social media platforms. When they reported on the primitives who believed they could swim with the sharks, even the most serious news anchors couldn't help but laugh out loud. 2 years ago, Earth was the punchline to every joke that was told. Then, without any prior caution, humanity re-established communications in order to send a single message that was extremely unsettling. "We greeted you with wide arms when you arrived. It's okay if some of you laugh at us. It should be okay. But this is the only warning you will receive if you have deceived us. Hurry up." Suddenly, the message came to an abrupt end, leaving the galaxy in a state of bewildered quiet. Without a doubt, this was humanity's pitiful attempt to restore its reputation. With the force of the cosmic powers that had so easily defeated them, what could the primitives possibly do to defend themselves against their might? The human beings were thought to be bluffing, According to the majority judgment, it was not a bluff on their part. Behind closed doors, the most brilliant brains on the planet had been toiling at as hard as they could to reverse engineer the cutting-edge technology that was being used against them by aliens. At this point, human spacecraft were outfitted with unofficial Slian weaponry and biotechnology that was a knockoff of Jandis's. What was about to happen was that mankind, fueled by wrath and yearning for revenge, was about to demonstrate to the galaxy what it was actually capable of. That was something that the Slian were the first to discover the hard way. In a catastrophic surprise attack, human warships materialized in the sky of the 7 core worlds that had been destroyed and unleashed a tremendous bombardment with improved Viridium missiles. Following the collision of the projectiles with the planets, the atmospheres of the planets were engulfed in catastrophic firestorms that were visible from orbit. Due to the fact that the air itself was on fire, Slian cities turned into infernos. The instantaneous combustion of millions of victims who had been killed occurred within a radius of 1,000 miles from each impact site. Those who were able to survive the initial explosions were quickly killed by the noxious gases that engulfed the worlds that had been destroyed. The crown treasures of the Slian Empire had been turned to lifeless husks in a matter of hours without any discernible change. The attack left the galaxy in a state of shock, yet the majority of people saw it as a coincidence. The humans had been fortunate enough to catch the Slian while they were letting their guard down. There is no way that it could or does occur again. At the same time, the Jandis were certain that their defenses were impregnable. It was when the first Jandis began to rot alive that confidence was completely destroyed. It started out with a few spots of necrotic flesh, but almost immediately Jandis patients were watching in horror as their own body parts began to slough off all the way down to the bone. The medical professionals at Jandis were working tirelessly to determine the reason behind the dreadful condition. The discovery that they made rocked them to their very core. It was discovered that the humans had hybridized the Jandis bioweapon that had been used on them with a human disease known as leprosy on their own. Within its victims, this mutant super disease devoured them from the inside out with a terrible degree of efficiency. There was no benefit to quarantines. The rotting matter absorbed entire planets, turning Jandis space into a tomb as it spread throughout the universe. At this point, it was the turn of the Dalans to shake. The species that had before laughed off humanity's requests for mercy now bowed their heads in humble submission before the planet, pleading for forgiveness. In addition to expressing their sincere regret for their theft, they offered to repay twice as much as they had taken. During the time when they were still groveling, the human warships emerged on skis. The Dalan homeworld, that gleaming metropolis that had endured for millennia, was transformed to molten slag in a matter of minutes. There was not even a single opportunity for the once powerful Dalan military to put up a fight. They were ripped apart like tissue paper by human beams and missiles that penetrated their hulls. For the last time, the humans communicated their position to the whole galaxy through a broadcast. There was no room for human habitation. The destruction of any ship, regardless of how peaceful its goals may have been, would occur without any hesitation or prior warning. The line had been drawn: either withdraw or perish. All of the surviving galactic rulers were furious at the hubris displayed by the upstart humans. What right did they have to impose their will on the more mature races? Thousands of spacecraft, representing the pride of a dozen different stellar civilizations, descended upon human territory in order to teach the barbarians a lesson. This was done in order to put Earth back in its proper position. A great alliance was established, and a large fleet was built. Not a single vessel made it back for more. A series of flashes of weapon fire were seen by long-range sensors, followed by an unsettling silence. The only thing that was discovered by the probes that were sent to investigate were clouds of debris that were drifting. The most powerful fleet in the galaxy had mysteriously disappeared. No one was allowed to enter the region of space that surrounded the Earth for many decades to come. All of the species that put the humans' ultimatum to the test quickly realized that it was not a harmless threat. Any ship, whether it was a civilian freighter or a military patrol, that wandered too close to the boundary had its engines disabled by some technology that was unknown to that particular ship. After a few moments, it would be shattered by human strikes that were performed with pinpoint accuracy, leaving no survivors. There was a creature that had been formed by the galaxy, and it desired to be left alone for all of eternity. Murloc couldn't help but gaze out the viewport of his cot, his eyes wandering aimlessly as his thoughts was preoccupied with the precarious situation that his species found itself in. The Threen were a force that couldn't be stopped, They were unrelenting and ruthless, and they appeared to be hell-bent on eradicating the Balkans from the face of the galaxy. In addition, what were the other races doing while the people of Murloc were being gradually eradicated from existence? None of it. Not even a single item. As Murloc reflected aloud, his voice was colored with equal parts despondency and resentment. He said, "Everyone else in this galaxy sits there and watches us die slowly at the hands of the Threen. They commit no action. If somebody were to just leave us alone, it would be to everyone's benefit." When he suddenly had a wild thought, it hit him like a bolt of plasma, and his sentences began to fade off. If only we were more like humans, we would be in a much better position. Caval, who had been tinkering with a datapad that was not functioning properly, suddenly raised his eye stalks and directed his gaze incredulously toward Murloc. "Murloc, have you completely lost your mind? The humans are insane individuals who prefer to be alone and fire their weapons first, without bothering to ask questions later. They want us to be the same as they are." However, Murloc was only able to just hear his wingmate laughing. An idea had been planted in his head, and it was already taking root, blossoming into a desperate and hazardous plan. He was already in the process of putting it into action. The following day, Murloc found himself in the cockpit of his one-man Balkan fighter, his manipulator digits flying over the controls as he charted a course that no one had dared attempt in decades. A direct flight into human space. This was a course that no one had ever attempted before. The moment that Murdoch informed Caval of his plans, Caval's mandibles were on the verge of hitting the ground. "Murdoch, this is a suicide attempt. It is impossible for anyone to return from entering human land. There is no one." However, Murloc knew what he wanted to do. In the event that the rest of the galaxy was satisfied to allow the Balkans to be killed, then perhaps it was time to turn to the one species that had told the galaxy to screw itself. As Murdoc's little ship hurtled across the vacuum, the auto-assist kept him on course while he rationed his diminishing food supplies. The weeks passed as he continued to ration his food supply. His vessel suddenly went silent, the engines turning out abruptly, and he was left drifting in eerie quiet. This occurred just as he was beginning to seriously consider the possibility that he had made a significant error in estimating the location of human space. In a state of alarm, Murdoc's eyes darted all the way to his instrument panel, but the readouts revealed that all of the systems were functioning normally. In the event that the spacecraft had lost power, there was no mechanical explanation for this. As soon as Murloc comprehended what must have occurred, a chill ran down his carapace. Considering that humans are notorious for their capacity to cripple any ship that approaches their zone, this must have been the result of human activity. Murloc engaged the communicator on his ship and began broadcasting on all frequencies, his words flowing out in a frenzied rush. He was slightly fumbling in his haste, but he was really eager to get his message across. "In the event that any human beings are paying attention, my name is Murloc. The Threen are destroying my people, and I am a Balkan. My people are being wiped off. We are in need of assistance, any assistance. As a result of what was done to you, I came here because I can comprehend the reasons behind your decision to turn your back on the galaxy. I don't blame you, but I beg you not to let an entire species to perish as a result of the terrible actions of a few individuals." It appeared as though the communication unit was making fun of Murloc's distress because it did not respond to his pleadings and instead remained silent. His calls for assistance went unanswered for a considerable amount of time, and there was no indication that anyone had even heard him. As a result of whatever that occurred within Murloc, his feelings of hopelessness and frustration erupted into a raging rage. When his manipulator digit wrapped around the grip of his sidearm, he instantly felt the weapon pressing down on his hip with a great deal of force. He drew the cannon in a single seamless motion and fired it toward the disabled FTL drive of his own ship, targeting it with pinpoint accuracy. It was a blast that reverberated throughout the little vessel as the drive ruptured, causing a shower of sparks and fragments to fly everywhere. As a result of Murdoc's recent destruction of this sole method of escape, he was now completely dependent on the efforts of the humans. However, he was completely uncaring. In the event that the human beings desired to take his life, they would have to be confronted directly. He was not going to suffer a death of cowardice, alone himself and abandoned by a galaxy that did not care about him. Once more, Murloc brought the communicator up to his mandibles, and his voice was quivering with the wrath and pain that he was experiencing. "Would you like this to happen?" He screamed into the nothingness that felt no compassion. You want me to beg, don't you? To kneel down? Not going to happen. Do you hear me, you human beings? I won't do that. In the event that you are going to kill me, at the very least, you should have the courage to cut my face off. Murdoch waited, his heart hammering, as the silence continued for what seemed like an eternity after it had been going on for so long. Although his manipulator digits twitched and he felt the need to go for his sidearm, he was aware that this would be a fruitless endeavor. The human race would have made him a charred heap of carapace by this point if they had wanted him to die. Instantaneously, his vessel lurched, and the inertial dampener struggled to adjust for the fact that an unseen force had taken control of his vessel. In an attempt to make sense of what was going on, Murlock's eye stalks swiveled in a furiously determined manner. The force was pulling his vessel, and it was being tugged relentlessly towards something enormous. It was during the time that Murlock's spacecraft was being consumed by the enormous maw of a docking bay that he felt his mandibles become loose. This human spacecraft was a behemoth, easily dwarfing even the most powerful warships that the Balkans had to offer. A seemingly infinite expanse of armor and bristling weapon emplacements, its hull appeared to go on and on for an indefinite amount of time. When the airlock hissed open, the docking clamps had just about managed to secure themselves around his ship. Storming into his craft were human figures clad in armor, their faces hidden behind opaque visors protecting their identities. A pair of rough hands grabbed Murlock, yanking him out of his pilot's chair, and dragged him down the umbilical cord corridor. Murlock found himself in a room that was devoid of any furniture and had a low lighting scheme. He was hurled into a chair that was bolted to the floor. At the entrance, the human guards took up places, their rifles trained on the individual in question. They waited after that. There was a slow passage of time. Because of this tiredness, Murlock's eye stalks were drooping, his throat was dry, and his carapace was itching. Nevertheless, the human beings did not speak or act in any way. They may have been statues if they had been made. At precisely the moment that Murdoch was beginning to question whether or not they intended to simply abandon him here to rot, the door hissed open. A human officer walked in. His clothing was spotless, and the medals that he wore on his chest shone brightly. The eyes of this man were steely and impenetrable, and he towered above Murdoch. The cop yelled out, "Talk down. What brings you to this location?" A little period of silence passed, during which Murdoch's mandibles worked in silence before he found his voice. An outpouring of words came from him like a flood of desperation. During his speech he discussed the unrelenting progress of the Threen, the burning of worlds, and the massacre of populations. He described the fleets that were stationed in the Balkans, which were constantly outgunned and outmatched, and they were compelled to watch helplessly as their people were being ruthlessly eradicated. With a trembling voice, Murlock pleaded with her to please. "We are in need of assistance. Any assistance. All of you, regardless of your race, need to comprehend the evil that exists in a galaxy that merely observes the unfolding of genocide." The human officer's face did not show any hesitation or distress. "It is no longer our concern to be concerned with the issues of the galaxy. We do not participate in your battle." It seemed as if something broke in Murlock. He felt a burst of rage that was raging through him, and it was all-consuming. Without paying attention to the weapons that were immediately pointed on him, he jumped to his feet. Murdoch yelled at the hypocrites of the group. "You chastise the galaxy for its inaction, but you continue to act in the same manner. You are familiar with the agony of betrayal, of witnessing the suffering and death of your people while others make fun of you. What sets you apart from people who have hurt you in the past? Please explain." In a second, the human guards were on him, and their armored gauntlets slammed him back into the chair. Murlock struggled, but their grip was immovable. As he watched, the cop remained unmoved, his expression a mask that was difficult to decipher. The officer spoke in a commanding manner. "Take him to a cell. It's over for us here." As Murlock sat in his cell, the days seemed to blend together into one another. Only the occasional clank of the meal tray being forced through the slot in the door could be heard, which was the only sound that disturbed the silence. The four metal walls appeared to be closing in on him. Murlock's appetite had evaporated, and he began to nibble on the strange meal. His initial reaction was one of wrath, during which he pounded on the door and yelled until his throat became raw. After that, he appealed with the guards, negotiating and trying to persuade them to do something. Last but not least, he did nothing but sit there, staring at the walls, his hope dwindling away like blood from a wound. He was unsuccessful. They would not be of any assistance. He had wasted his time and effort with a desperate gamble. His final days would be spent festering in this jail, unnoticed and unmourned, as the Balkans would collapse and he would spend his final days there. The sound of the cell door opening jolted Murdoch out of his negative daydream and brought him back to reality. In a drowsy manner, he looked up, anticipating to see the typical security guard arriving with his lunch. Instead of that, he found himself being pulled to his feet and being forced to march down the corridor. In stark contrast to the Spartan interrogation area, the room that he was transported to was considerably larger and had a dimly lit atmosphere. A gigantic viewport covered one wall, displaying a star field that was streaked with the blue of fast-forward travel. There, silhouetted against the stars, stood a person that Murloc knew from the intelligence briefings. It was the captain of the human ship. This caused the captain to turn his head and find Murloc's eyes. His countenance was inscrutable for a considerable amount of time as he merely looked. After that, he made his statement. The captain stated that your statements have made quite a commotion among the members of my crew. There are a significant number of those who have been observing the progress of the Threens and discussing the merits of our policy of non-intervention. Murloc did not utter a single word, barely daring to take a breath. The captain went on to say that we had arrived at a conclusion. The military effort in the Balkans will receive assistance from a task force comprised of volunteers. I am going to guide it myself. Murloc detected a weakening in his knees. The captain responded by saying, "You mean we are going to assist you in fighting the Threen? The time has come for humanity to understand that evil is successful when decent creatures do nothing to stop it." In a haze, the trip to the space station in the Balkans went by. Murloc was awestruck as he saw the fleet come together from the bridge of the human flagship, where he was standing. These were vessels that had never been seen before in the galaxy. They were brimming with armaments that made the three armada appear to be things that children would play with. The trio was never going to have a chance. The human fleet tore through their spacecraft like a plasma lance through paper, and its sophisticated weaponry turned the technology that the Threens had developed against them. The invaders' formerly unstoppable advance was destroyed as Murloc watched, his heart rising as he watched them be forced back. The humans and the Balkans gathered together in the aftermath, as the last of the Threen ships exited the scene. During the crucible of battle, there were no elaborate rituals or flowery speeches. Rather, there was just a straightforward understanding and mutual respect that had been established. It was made abundantly plain by the humans that this was not a preliminary step toward reintegrating into the galactic community. They did not act because they wanted to recover their position among the stars. Rather, they did it because it was the proper thing to do. That particular chapter of their history was never resolved. During the time that Murloc was observing the human fleet getting ready to depart, the captain was accompanying him. "Explain it to me," the captain asked. "Now, what are you going to do?" It was a question that Murdoch thought about. He stated that he will go back to his people. You should assist them in rebuilding, and you should make sure that the galaxy never forgets the lesson that we learned today. The skipper gave a little nod. And what is the relevance of that? The captain's sight was met by the eye stalks of the Murloc, that there are many different kinds of strength, and that even the most resolute species can be compelled to take action if they are brought to their breaking point. At that moment, the human beings withdrew, their ships dissipating into the void around them. As Murloc watched them leave, he felt a peculiar mixture of emotions inside of him, including appreciation, respect, and a sense of wonder that lingered in the back of his mind. As a result of the fact that he had witnessed firsthand the foolishness of underestimating the depths of the human spirit, he was aware that the galaxy would never again make that error. You have arrived at the conclusion of the tale. If you found this tale to be entertaining and would like to show your support for us, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to our channel. And for each and every comment that has the number 88, I will give each and every one of them my heart. Your time is greatly appreciated.